Technical training can be the backbone of innovation and efficiency in any company. How do you know if it's actually working? Are your employees mastering the skills that they need and as a direct result of the training? In this video, we're going to uncover the exact metrics and tools that you need to measure the success of your technical training programs and ensure that you're driving real results for your company. More than ever, businesses are requiring data to substantiate the cost of training. CFOs and CEOs are no longer okay with, but it'll improve morale and productivity. They want to see the evidence for that training that's being created. They want to know that there's a return on investment for the cost of developing that training, and more importantly, the cost of sending all these employees to that training. The great news is technical training is one of the best places to start measuring and actually demonstrating a return on investment of your training dollars. It's much easier to show results and an ROI of technical training than it is, say, leadership training. Not that it's impossible for more of the soft skills, but it is way more challenging to demonstrate an ROI as a direct result of training for more of the soft skills. Hey there, I'm Mary. Thank you so much for watching. In this video, I'm going to start with a definition of technical training because we all have our own definitions of that. And then I'm going to briefly discuss why it's absolutely critical that you are measuring your technical training programs. Let's get right to it. So first, understand that technical training is focused on teaching employees the specific skills, tools, and knowledge required to perform their job, or processes required to perform their job. It's different than, say, more of the soft skills training. So for example, communication or leadership, in that it's very focused on the individual skills required for your job. And again, I'm focusing on skills and competencies as opposed to particular tasks, because skills and competencies are transferable to a variety of tasks. At least that's the thinking behind that. A lot of organizations think of technical training as IT related training or coding or data analytics or software engineering. But actually, technical training happens in every type of industry. You'll see technical training with machine operators or sheet metal mechanics. And I've even designed training for engineers who are responsible for driving trains, or for the people who are responsible for maintaining the track of a railroad. It crosses industries. It's not focused just on engineering or IT. Technical training spans all industries: healthcare, manufacturing, technology. All of those areas use a form of technical training in one way or the other. Technical training aims to ensure that employees can apply the technical skills that they have effectively in their roles, improve their tactical skills in their specific roles, and also keep up with industry standards for whatever role they're in. It can include skills, competencies, and processes. Just think of it in terms of tactical, role-specific training as opposed to the people skills such as team building or communication and those types of things. Okay, now that we have the definition out of the way, let's talk a little bit about why measuring technical training is so critical and essential for your organization. Technical skills have a direct impact on operational efficiency, product development, and innovation. If you can start to measure the direct result of training on those core areas of any business, then you're also going to substantiate the value of the training organization or of providing training. Those of us who are learning professionals, we know the value of training, and it's vast. It's not just about technical skills. It does a lot of things. It's a way for people to get together. It shows an investment in employees, and it makes them feel like they're important enough to be invested in. There's all kinds of values of it, but all of those are hard to quantify. Technical skills are easier to quantify. And if you can start to think in terms of how can I show the value of this, then you have more leverage to address some of those other things, to provide some of that soft skills training, because now the organization and the leaders in that organization are starting to see the value that training brings to all of their employees. Without seeing that hard data, it's difficult for senior leaders who are responsible for budgets, and cost of the organization to make good decisions regarding a training organization. So now let's talk about some of the key metrics that you can measure so that you can start to be successful in this area for your organization. We could talk all day about the Kirkpatrick's model, and you can Google that, or I'll link a video down below that I made on the topic. Well, I haven't actually made it yet, but I'm sure I will at some point. But basically, your internal customers, they don't want to hear about the Kirkpatrick model. That's geek speak left for us learning professionals. We can debate that and discuss it and evaluate it and all those things when we're amongst other learning professionals. But what our internal customers want to know is they want to know, show me the money, show me the value that this training is adding to the organization. So I'm going to speak in those terms because that's the way that we should be speaking with our internal customers in the organization. When we start using geek speak, we just alienate those that we need to work with. So of course, in line with Kirkpatrick model, if you are a learning professional, this channel is for both learning professionals as well as business leaders in organizations that may not have their own dedicated learning team. So some of the things that you would find in the Kirkpatrick model are some of the things that I'm going to say right now. The first and easiest thing to measure in the organization is knowledge retention. If you're not doing anything else, you should be measuring knowledge retention. And the only way to adequately measure knowledge retention as a direct result of the training that you're providing is by doing both a pre and post assessment. Lots of organizations do this post assessment, and then they take credit for the employees for that the training provided all of that knowledge. But that's not accurate because they may have had that knowledge before they came to the training. Unless you do a pre and post assessment, you don't have an accurate representation of what they really learned as a direct result of your training program. So that should be the very basic, lowest level form of measurement you should be doing with any training that you're doing. It's so easy to do knowledge retention. And along those lines are also certifications and standardized exams. All of that falls into knowledge retention as a form of measurement. The next level of measurement that I would talk about would be practical application of the skills that they've learned in the training program. Now, in this session, I'm not going to get caught up on the differences between online learning and instructor-led learning, but when you're measuring things like practical application, it can be more challenging to come up with ways to measure that for an online training program. It's not impossible, you just have to think a little bit more creatively, but it is a little bit more, this is easier to do if you're in an instructor-led environment. A great way to do this would be they've been shown how to do something and now they get to demonstrate it, and that could be going around the room demonstrating it. That could be some sort of standardized kind of practical application that you've created for them. I think in terms, because it's easy for everyone to understand, it could be building a Lego house, right? So here's your tools, build your own Lego house. And that I'm using that example because that's something that we could all kind of visualize. But depending on what industry you're in, It's any sort of application of the knowledge that they've learned. So I've worked in aviation, for example, and sheet metal mechanics had to have a variety of technical skills, from countersinking to drilling straight holes to doing those types of things. So those are things that you can measure. You can measure at the beginning of the course, are they able to do any of these things? And then measure after training if they're how much they improve. You can create a rubric around that. That's practical application of the knowledge that they've learned. The next level of measurement would be around the topic of performance metrics. And again, there's lots of ways of doing this. It might be the error rate, of doing whatever it is that they're doing. It could be debugging times. It could be how long, it could be their productivity numbers. Does it increase? Do they have fewer errors with the things that they're doing? It could be reduced cycle times. It could be less scrap or less damage, to a product happening among new hires. It could be a decrease or an increase in customer satisfaction ratings, as a performance metric. So there's all kinds of ways to measure performance metrics, but that is actually like measuring productivity and quality and making a direct correlation to the training that they received. The only way you can do that, again, is to have an immediate pre and post from the training. You could then track it over 30, 60, 90 days. I'm not a huge fan of taking credit where other things influenced that score. So, for example, we all know that no matter how good the training is, if somebody has a really bad manager or who isn't giving good direction or isn't allowing them the opportunity to practice, then that's going to negatively impact the scoring. So the bad news is that if you're going to take credit for the positive numbers, you also have to take credit for the bad numbers. So just be careful around how you use those performance metrics and being able to directly tie them with a caveat, to the training program. I mean, sometimes, of course, there's always going to be other influences, but my thinking is if you can decrease the variables that are impacting those numbers, then you can take more credit for training being a direct responsibility. Or if you can control the environment where they are actually in a training environment for 30, 60, or 90 days, and you're able to monitor them in that environment, then that would be a great way to be able to demonstrate that training was a direct result of the change in those numbers. Time to proficiency is another way to measure training. How long does it take them to ramp up to have the skills that they need to be productive on the job? What's the timeline? And are you able to decrease it? Let's say that you're creating a new onboarding program for new employees of a certain craft or a certain position, and it's a technical training program. Maybe you have a control group of people who didn't get the training. How long did it take them to ramp up? And then having your time to proficiency of the target group, of the group that gets the training, and being able to demonstrate that. Again, to have really good data, you also have to have this control group of data to do a comparison with. If you work in a global company, sometimes that might mean that a group in one location gets this training program and a group in this location gets this other training program, so that you can do some sort of comparison of those numbers and have data to support it. So those are some of the key metrics that you should be thinking about when measuring training. I know that's a lot. So if you have questions around it, put them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And if there's something that you're specifically struggling with regarding measurement, then let me know that in the comments too, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Or if you'd like a video on a specific topic that's related to anything training, all things training. Along those lines, if you're enjoying the content so far, you're getting something out of it, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked the thumbs up down below And if you want to see more content like this, be sure to subscribe. Okay, let's get into the tools and methods that are going to help you to measure your training content. So depending on the industry that you're working in, I'm just going to throw out a bunch of examples here of tools and methods, ways that you could measure training that would be helpful. One of the things that I love most is some sort of simulator or a lab environment. So for example, I said I worked in aviation, and in that role, of course, pilots have their simulators where they learn how to fly different aircraft. So they're and they do that for months. They actually get certified using simulators, before they ever actually go up into an aircraft. The same thing goes for conductors and engineers on the railroad. They have simulators that they practice on, and with lots of environments, with snow and rain and mountains and things on the track and all types of things, so that they can experience all of those situations in a simulated environment. You can do the same thing for coding. You can provide coding type scenarios with simulations where they have to debug, using a simulator or deploy code or whatever it is that they're doing in a simulated environment. Same with a lab. So a lab is a little bit different in that if you can't actually use a simulator, where it's usually on a computer where you're practicing, you can come up with some sort of a lab environment. So for example, at one time I was working with a technology company that installed internet cable. And so there were a variety of skills these people needed to have in order to do these installations. So we built a lab in a classroom that had all of the mock-ups of what they might see in any kind of home, different kind of exteriors of different homes, and how the wires would be run and what types of boxes that they might see in that environment. So just think a little bit bigger on a lab. Try to simulate. The purpose of a lab or a simulator is to simulate what they're going to experience in their actual job. You can do the same kind of thing with customer service. You can create a lab environment where there are people who are the pretend customers, or a simulated environment where you have virtual customers that are coming in and requiring different things, and they have to make decisions around that. So that's a tool or a methodology that you might be able to use. You can also use project-based assessments. So if you have somebody who's going to be in a project role, then you can provide scenarios that are project-based, like here's your situation, here's your project, and have them make decisions to get through that project. And then those decisions can influence the next set of questions or scenario that they get in their learning. If you have a learning management system, which if you're in a corporate environment, I know you do, but if you're in a smaller business, you may not have a learning management system. You might look into that and see if that might be a way. It's a great way to track any of your assessments that you're doing, and also to store. So it can provide you all kinds of analytics, but it also is a housing location for all of your training content. It's a one-stop shop, if you will. Sandbox environments are really great for technology related situations or skills that you're trying to learn. They're also really great for any sort of technical skill. If you can create some kind of simulated sandbox environment where they can't hurt the actual product, but they get this sandbox where it feels to them like they are working on the actual product, then that is going to be really helpful. And of course, scenario-based learning is also a method that you can use. And scenario-based learning is a lot like some of these other things that I showed here, but it could be an online learning that you've created where they have lots of decisions that they have to make through a scenario, and every decision just takes them down a different path throughout the scenario. So these are a really effective way, and you can do this for technical skills. I remember creating a scenario-based assessment for mechanics where they had to troubleshoot what was wrong with an engine, and different scenarios would show up and they'd have to make a decision on what do I do next, and then that decision would impact where they would get taken and what the outcome would be. So you can create scenario-based type assessments for a variety of skills. You don't have to put someone on an engine and have them troubleshoot a problem. You can have them do it in a scenario-based learning environment. So that's another tool. Another tool that you might think of are skills assessments or skills matrices. If you have some sort of a rubric where you can watch their skill over time. So at one organization, we created a program where basically the employees were assessed at 30, 60, and 90 days by a qualified assessor who had more of a unbiased, they had a rubric that they followed where they knew what rating to give this employee, and we were tracking their progression of improving their skills over time, because you don't really expect anyone to be fully proficient at 30 days. What you want to do is be able to see continual improvement and be able to track that. And that also helps the employee to feel good about themselves while they're doing that. It does take a little bit of investment to create that kind of a program, but that is another way to measure, or a tool to help you to measure training. Okay, that's a lot of tools and methods. So let's talk next about best practices for measuring your technical training programs. I know this is a lot of information and it's really just high level. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or just keep checking back. Well, you won't have to check back if you subscribe, because I'll be making more content about this. But first and foremost, you want to make sure, as a best practice, you want to make sure that your learning objectives are tied to your business objectives. Your program and course objectives are tied to your learning objectives, and your assessments are tied to your course objectives. So whatever it is that you're measuring should be a direct measurement to the objectives that you were trying to achieve for the program. If you're not familiar with course objectives or how to write them, then check in the description down below, or I'll pin it to the end of this video, a video that I have on course objectives and how to write good course objectives, as well as how important they are to every course or program that you build. So that's the best practice. You don't want to just be assessing things willy-nilly. They should be a direct reflection. You're trying to prove that the objectives were achieved. That's the point of the assessment, is did you achieve what you intended to achieve? Did you resolve the problem that was brought to you? And if the problem was a lack of knowledge and skill, did you solve it, and can you prove that? Another best practice is to use benchmarking data to help you to come up with what performance should be at any given time. The example I'll use for this is instructional design. You can find training data that tells you how long it should take to design a variety of different types of training content. So how long should it take to design an online course versus an instructor-led course? How long should it take to design a 15-minute course versus an hour and a half course? All of those things. So you can use those benchmarks to help you to track this data when you're measuring the proficiency of people that you are training. So use some benchmark data for whatever the career field is, whether it's a nurse or a mechanic. You can find benchmark data on the average length of time it takes to ramp these people up, as well as to be proficient and able to do a task. So you can use that as part of your measurement. Another best practice is to make sure that you're constantly gathering data from management, coworkers, and from the employees themselves. So after they leave the training, even make sure that you're continuing to get feedback from their manager, from the person who's training them, OJT, from the employee themselves on how well they think they're doing, or what they still think they need help with. That's going to be valuable to you to continue to tweak the program, as well as to inform your decisions on maybe what you should be tracking versus what you did track, because you can always change some of those measurements, right? So that's a really important step. You know, one of the worst things we can do is build a training, send it off, and never look at it again. We never know the impact, the longer term impact of that training, especially in the technical world, if we're not able to connect throughout time to make sure that it's stuck. Because people might feel great about your training when they leave it on the day they leave it, but 30 days later, they may be floundering at their job because they weren't able to retain it for some reason. That's valuable information for you to have. One thing that's really hard for learning professionals that I've worked with, but maybe one of the most important things that we need to adapt to, is being more agile in designing and developing and deploying our content. You know, we're being asked more and more to build content, put it out before we feel good about it. And some instructional designers or learning professionals, you know, we don't want to put out shoddy work, but our companies are requiring it faster than what we can actually do good work. So we have to become better at being agile, as at utilizing agile methodologies and updating content iteratively. One thing I do when I'm put in this situation is I make it very clear you're not going to get my best work in that amount of time, but I can put something out with the understanding that we're going to iteratively improve upon it. So we have to be okay with that. It's actually kind of good to do this because I think we have a natural tendency to build a project, push it out, and then take on the next project and never think about that old one ever again. That's just kind of how it worked. We pushed out a product and then we moved on to the next one because there was always another one to work on. Well, when you have a more iterative approach, you're able to get the feedback from those who are using the content and make it even better. So I think it's hard to do because we want to do our best and it doesn't allow us to put out our best, but it actually ends up being a better product in the end because sometimes we want to make something way better than what it needs to be. And when we get the feedback from employees, we're able to see what's really working and what isn't, you know, and sometimes good is good enough, you know, and it doesn't need any more than that. So using agile methodologies helps us. It helps inform and allows us to do an iterative kind of approach to that training content. I would really leverage that as a best practice as well. You know, in summary, measuring training is how the training organization proves its value. That's such an important thing to remember. Without having measurement, we are not proving our value. We are an overhead organization, and that puts us at great risk. Like anyone in the organization, we have to be improving our value. And unfortunately, everybody has gone to some sort of training, so they believe they are an expert in training. And that's one of the things we always kind of have to fend off. It's like, I've eaten carrot cake, so I must be a master baker at baking carrot cake. Or I've used a computer, so I must be able to be a great programmer on computers. I mean, we don't think that, but it's funny that people think that about training. So measuring technical training is the easiest place to start for you. If you're not currently measuring in your organization, I would suggest you start with pre and post knowledge assessments. That's the easiest place. And then just start to build on that. But make sure that you're measuring every single training course and that they are directly aligned to the course objective. Whatever measurement you're doing is directly aligned to achieving the objectives that you have. I always say, start from where you are, wherever that is. And that's why I say, if you're not doing anything right now, just start with a knowledge assessment and continue to build on that. You can't overhaul everything at once. You can't go from not building anything to all of a sudden tracking performance measures. I mean, you can, but it's going to be really hard, and you're probably going to have a lot of resistance, and you probably aren't going to get good data. So start from where you are and iteratively add to that measurement. It's much more effective if you can make incremental changes. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you learned something or that it's impactful for you, that you're able to use the information provided. If I can answer any questions, again, put them in the comments below. And I hope to see you on the next video. Have a great day.